Good morning, Excellencies. Good morning, Excellencies. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I call to order Roundtable 1 entitled Empowering Persons with Disabilities and Ensuring Social Development Policies through Innovative Financing. Together with Mr. Gomez, Director for International Relations at ONE's social group, we will facilitate this interactive discussion. Mr. Gomez is Director for International Relations at ONE's social group. Mr. Gomez is also Executive Vice President of ONE's Foundation for Latin America, Vice President of the European Association of Service Providers for Persons with Disabilities, and a board member of European Disabilities Forum and Spain NAB. He holds a degree in political science and a master's in European studies. Previously, he was a director and deputy director of European Disability Forum and worked on disabilities project in European Union, candidate countries, and Mediterranean. He also has an experience in European transnational cooperation and program. To introduce myself, my name is Zuleikha Tambwe. I serve as counselor at the Permanent Mission of Tanzania to the United Nations. Prior to this position, I served as African Union expert in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Tanzania. I joined Tanzania's Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 2010. Today, together with Mr. Gomez, we will facilitate this roundtable discussion on empowering persons with disability and enhancing social development policies through innovative financing. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to share a few words with you to set the scene for this discussion. This year's overarching theme for the 18th session of the conference is enhancing public awareness of the rights and contribution of persons with disability for social development leading up to the Second World Social Summit for Social Development. With this in mind, this roundtable discussion will highlight the importance of social roles and policies for development of persons with disabilities and explore avenues of innovative financing to ensure their successful implementation. Distinguished panelists, delegates, and partners, in the midst of the compounded crisis, including climate breakdown, rising poverty, and proliferating conflicts, we face a subdued forecast for economic growth and profound implication of achieving agenda for sustainable development. In the lead up to the fourth International Conference on Financing for Development, it is clear there is a dearth of long-term development financing, with consensus settling on estimates of around 4 trillion of additional investment requiring annually for developing countries. Yet, access to affordable financing for developing countries is diminishing, with many facing high debt service burden in conjunction with overall trends indicating decline in official development assistance. Many developing countries are experiencing rapid shrinking physical space and are facing challenges in mobilizing sufficient resources to ensure social development policies and empowering persons with disabilities. The call to the formulation and finance new development pathways to deliver on sustainable development goals and ensure that no one is left behind could not be more urgent, not least for the global community of persons with disabilities. Ladies and gentlemen, agreement there is no universal agreed single definition on innovative financing. Rather, the term arose out of recognition of the increased need to ensure and diversify financial flows towards developing countries within the wide prism of international cooperation for development. Thus, innovative financing can refer to any mechanism, measures, instruments, or solutions which increase the volume, efficiency, and effectiveness of financial flows as supplemental to and supportive of ODA, and encompassing goal of economic, social, sustainable development, and sustainable development. These may include microfinancing, philanthropic financing, public-private partnership, green bonds, blue bonds, vaccine bonds, social impact bonds, and development impact bonds, taxes and levies, such as solidarity taxes, reduction in the cost of remittances flow, climate finance, carbon or emission taxes, the channeling of special drawing rights, and blended finance. Although progress has certainly been achieved since the convening of the World Summit for Social Development in 1995, persons with disability continue to face challenges and barriers in the attainment of social development objective. Ending poverty and extreme poverty, establishing inclusive education, expanding social protection, and fostering inclusive labor conditions remain key challenges across regions. Yet, public spending on social programs for persons with disability averaged 1% of gross domestic product, a level that remained stagnant since 2017. Most of the innovative financing mechanisms created thus far have focused mainly on healthcare and infrastructure, with fewer targeting education or social development goals. Nonetheless, important steps have been taken to integrate disability perspective in innovative financing, such as climate financing, that respond to the needs and priorities of persons with disabilities, including through the drafting of guidelines, technical notes, and policy papers. General principles for disability responsive and disability inclusive financing decisions include participation of persons with disabilities at all stages of policy formulation and budgeting, from designing and implementation to monitoring and evaluation, and the incorporation of accessibility and universal design principles into the formulation of policies and allocation of resources and budgeting. Furthermore, CRPD compliant financing entails diverting funds and resources away from policies, institutions, and programs that contravene provisions of the Convention, such as segregated schools, towards policies, institutions, and policies that comply with, respect, and seek to implement the provisions of the Convention, such as inclusive education. These principles can be applied to both disability-specific and mainstreaming social development policies. Dear colleagues and friends, this roundtable seeks to further discuss and expand on measures, promising practices, and actionable policies to harness and direct innovative financing towards enhancing social policies and empowerment of persons with disability. It is my great honor to introduce and extend our warm welcome to our distinguished panelists. Ms. Jane Fitzgerald Spring from Disability Strategy Advisory Council of Australia, Mr. Łukasz Krasoń from Government Plenipotentiary for Persons with Disability from Poland, Mr. Boucar Diuouf, Director General of Social Action from the Ministry of Health and Social Affairs of Senegal, Dr. Ola Abualghaib, Director, United Nations Global Disability Fund, and Mr. Matrika Devkota, KOSHISH from Nepal. Ladies and gentlemen, we will shortly invite each of our panelists to deliver their presentation for 10 minutes to share their thoughts and insights on this crucial issue. Following their presentations, we will invite delegations and observers to participate in the interactive discussion through Q&A, to pose questions to the panel, or to make brief comments that are relevant and may contribute to the discussion of this roundtable. Participants who wish to take the floor are invited to press microphone button on the desk after the chair opens the floor. When given the floor, please unmute the microphone, identify yourself and your delegation or organization before you pose your question or comment. Please note that all interventions are strictly limited to 2 minutes with no exception in order to ensure discussion is interactive and allow for a wider participation. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now hand over to Mr. Gomez, Civil Society Co-Chair. Over to you, Mr. Gomez.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Mrs. Tambwe. Dear colleagues, it is my great honor to introduce and invite our first panelist, Mrs. Jane Fitzgerald Spring of the Disability Strategy Advisory Council, Australia, to the floor. Mrs. Spring is a disability advocate motivated by a desire to see inclusive communities where people with disabilities achieve their potential and thrive. Currently chair of Australia's Disability Strategy Advisory Council, Disability Council New South Wales, and Sydney University Sport, she is also a director of Royal Rehab, director of Venues NSW, and the vice president of NSW Institute of Public Administration. Mrs. Spring's deep expertise and many advisory positions and personal experience give a holistic approach to social development and enhancement of policy. Mrs. Spring, the floor is yours. Please remember to keep to the 10-minute time limit for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for that very kind introduction. It's an honour to be here today among such a distinguished panel and in the company of so many leaders dedicated to equity development and social justice. I'm particularly grateful to the United Nations for continuing to explore new and practical ways to accelerate inclusion, especially by focusing on innovation in financing and policy. As someone who has used a wheelchair for over 35 years, as an economist, a lawyer with a long public policy career, this issue is both personal and professional. I have seen the slow pace of change, but I've also seen the impact of well-designed, targeted actions that shift outcomes. Today I'll speak to 5 international and local areas where Australia is working to embed disability equity and using innovative financing to help make that happen. I'm going to start with Australia's International Disability Equity and Rights Strategy. In late 2024, Australia launched the International Disability Equity and Rights Strategy based on a clear principle that while inclusion is important, equity goes further. Inclusion invites participation, and equity changes the system to enable full participation. This strategy was developed through nearly 6 months of inclusive consultations across the Indo-Pacific, with almost 400 people contributing, over 70% of whom identifying as having a disability. And the consultations prioritised underrepresented voices, including women and girls with disability, people with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities, and those in remote or marginalised communities. The input from these consultations shaped 5 priorities: strengthening disability-led movements, tackling exclusion, building inclusive systems, ensuring access during crises and climate change, and improving data. Professor Rosemary Caius, a leading disability rights expert, Australian Human Rights Commissioner for Disability, and Vice Chair of the United Nations Committee on the CRPD, was part of the external reference group guiding the process, and her role helped ensure the strategy was aligned with international human rights frameworks and grounded in lived experience. Australia has set a clear target. By 2030, 70% of international development and humanitarian investments must perform effectively on disability equity. And this marks a shift from disability being a specialist issue to it being a central element of effective and inclusive development policy. The second theme I'd like to speak about is supporting organisations of persons with disabilities in the Indo-Pacific. We all know a strong disability rights movement depends on strong organisations led by people with disability, as these organisations know their communities and are well placed to drive change. Australia has committed $14 million through the Disability Inclusion Development Fund to strengthen the organisations, particularly in Indo-Pacific, and the funding is there to support leadership, advocacy and local solutions. Australia is working with groups such as the Pacific Disability Forum and Disability Rights Advocacy Fund, with partnerships focusing on providing core funding, capacity building and enabling organisations of persons with disabilities to influence policy and program design in their own countries. The third area that I think is important for all of us is to track investment through the disability policy marker. A key challenge, of course, in development is tracking how much support is actually directed to disability equity. And that's where the disability policy marker, developed by the Development Assistance Committee of the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, plays a critical role. The marker allows donors to classify each investment based on whether disability is a primary objective, a significant objective, or not targeted. This helps identify funding gaps, improve transparency, and guide future investment. Australia has embedded this marker in our development system and is advocating for the introduction of minimum standards. These would ensure that projects marked as disability relevant include clear objectives, inclusive design, and participation by people with disability. And at the recent Global Disability Summit, Australia joined the Amman-Berlin Declaration, committing to ensure at least 15% of development investments have disability as a core objective. A more consistent, standards-based disability marker is essential to achieving this goal and to making global disability financing more accountable. My fourth area is around innovative financing and funding what actually works. I want to talk about a couple of local programs in Australia that have been evaluated and are available online. We know innovative financing can transform the way we design, deliver and evaluate support by shifting the focus from the inputs to the actual outcomes. Since 2017, Australia has invested over $169 million to grow our social impact investment market. These models help fund social services by linking payment to measurable results, not just activity. One example is the Pay by Outcomes Trial 3, a program supporting long-term employment of people with disabilities through social enterprises. It involves government, investors, and service providers sharing responsibility and risk to achieve job outcomes. Let me briefly share Ben's story. Ben is a participant in this trial. He's a 45-year-old architectural technician with hearing loss. For years, he worked on short-term contracts, facing limited advancement and subtle barriers to inclusion. Through the Pay by Outcomes program, he joined Ability Works, and he's contributing to inclusive design projects for major clients. His manager says that Ben brings something rare, the ability to bridge lived experience with professional design expertise. Ben understands issues from a user's perspective, and he can translate those into actionable feedback that designers value. And his manager sees Ben as a future leader in inclusive design, and his employment was made possible by this outcomes-focused model. What makes this approach particularly valuable is that it brings together stakeholders with very different motivations, government, investors, and social enterprises, around a shared commitment to systems change. Government wants to test new financing models and learn how to embed outcomes-based payments into policy frameworks. Social enterprises see this as a way to demonstrate their effectiveness and to secure consistent support for wraparound services. And impact investors are using the trial to explore how capital can be used to fund social outcomes and grow that market for impact investment. While each stakeholder is bringing these different interests, the outcomes model gives them a common framework to focus results, share risk, and generate learning that can inform broader reform. I'll briefly also talk about a second program called Resolve in my home state of New South Wales. It's one of Australia's early social impact bonds. Resolve supported people with persistent mental health conditions by providing peer-led community-based services, crisis support, and respite care. The program attracted $7 million in private investment and tied government payments to reduced hospital use. And over nearly 8 years, it achieved better health and stability outcomes while easing demand on acute services. It also created the space for flexibility and innovation, demonstrating the benefits of linking funding to real-world results. Now, these programs show how social impact investment can fund what really works. And I'd just like to take a brief diversion. We're at a very interesting time in world history. In our country, in Australia, we're likely to see the biggest intergenerational wealth transfer in history from baby boomers. We're likely to see estimates of somewhere around $3.5 trillion moving from boomers to younger generation and philanthropic causes. This presents a historic opportunity for philanthropy and social investments, with many inheritors being values-driven and wanting to measure social impact and see things change over traditional charity. In many countries, there are community foundations. In Australia, in my home state, we have one called the Sydney Community Foundation. These community foundations are trusted brokers between donors, local organisations and government. They've got a deep knowledge of community needs, and they can aggregate smaller donations for systemic impact, and they're well positioned to partner on disability inclusive initiatives. Given the poverty of many governments nowadays, I see these opportunities as really worthwhile. My final point is around evaluation and measuring impact with people with disability. If we're going to fund differently, we also need to evaluate differently. Under Australia's disability strategy, we're developing a national guide for including people with disability in evaluation processes. This is not just about being consulted, it's about being actively involved in defining success, identifying relevant data, and interpreting the results. The guide we're working on will focus on accessible, culturally appropriate tools and be grounded in a rights-based approach. It's being developed with input from people with disability and will apply to a wide range of government programs. Logic is simple. If we want to know that something works for people with disability, we have to ask them and involve them in the process of finding the answer. Evaluation, including lived experience, leads to better policy, ensures services are responsive, inclusive, and able to demonstrate real outcomes, especially in a context of competing foundations and growing need. So progress in disability rights and inclusion requires more than policy commitments, requires smart funding, shared accountability, and the involvement of people with disability at every level. We've got the tools, we've got the strategies, the evidence-based investment models and frameworks for meaningful evaluation. What matters now is how we use them and how we ensure that people with disability remain at the centre of these solutions. Thanks again for the opportunity to contribute. I look forward to hearing from my fellow panellists.
I thank Mrs. Spring for her excellent presentation and really sticking to the time. Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Mr. Łukasz Krasoń, Government Plenipotentiary for Persons with Disabilities at the Ministry of Family, Labour and Social Policy of Poland. Mr. Krasoń is a trainer, motivational speaker, committed activist and social activist. He has also previously worked, among others, as a sustainability specialist of CSR expert in several corporations. He's an expert at the Strategy 2050 Institute, leading a team working for the disability community. Together with the Institute, he created a document full of rights, Pełnoprawni, which shows a model for thinking about support for persons with disabilities. Mr. Krasoń, welcome to the panel, and the floor is yours.
Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, I remember when the money transfer came to me for the first time, many years ago, the social pension, given when I turned 18 years old. I was happy to receive this money as a boy who relied on what he received from his parents or family. Such cash, not very large of course, but made an impression on me. However, this impression is for a moment, because it is almost always the case that the cash benefit runs out quickly. I had the chance to not be afraid of challenges, and even when many told me to knock myself on the head, I went to work despite my limitations. That is when I really understood the value of money. I say this because money in itself is not a bad thing, but for persons with disabilities, money alone can be more of a limitation than an opportunity. That is why I'm very pleased to read the provisions of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which direct a lot of attention to the individualization of support through a wide range of services and not just financing transfers. One of the most current and urgent issues in social policy today is to ensure that persons with disabilities are able to fulfill their right to live independently in accordance with Article 19 of the UN Convention and General Comment number 5. Independent living is an idea that has been shaped by a historical process in which persons with disabilities have taken control of the way they want to live through the creation of empowering forms of support, such as, for example, personal assistance for persons with disabilities. Personal assistance is the most important support service for persons with disabilities, with personal assistance, persons with disabilities, especially those who require 24-hour support, have the chance to live independently. A personal assistant is not a caregiver. It is a person who supports us in our daily functioning, allowing them to lead an independent and active life. The personal assistant acts according to the wishes of the person she supports, respecting his, her independence and choices. The extent of his or her support is tailored to the individual needs of the person using the personal assistance service. I would not be able to perform in front of you if it were not for my assistant, who assists me with all my activities also right now. He's helping me with my computer. I thank him for dressing me today, feeding me on breakfast, and putting me in the wheelchair. This is very important to tell it. In the preamble of the UN Convention, states parties recognize that many persons with disabilities live in poverty and underline the need to take action to address the impact of this factor of their well-being. In Poland, the answer to this state of matters is the idea of personal budget. This is one of the ideas developed in the project Active Persons with Disabilities, tools to support the independence of persons with disabilities, which was implemented in recent years with funding from European social funds, knowledge, education, development. The project involved representatives of civil societies, NGOs, and public administration officials. A personal budget is a package of arrangements granted to a person with disabilities in need of ongoing support to finance the cost of providing that support in the form of, for example, hour of personal assistant, respite care, medical devices and appliances, and technical aids, individual means for transport to compensate for the dysfunction, healthy services, and others. The amount of budget, this is very important, should result in each case from an analysis of the individual needs of the person with disabilities as indicated by the person himself or his legal representative. In the opinion of project participants, a personal budget is a necessary way to independent living and the influence of persons with disabilities on the forms of supports they use. The application and dissemination of the personal budget model may result in the long-awaited move or key social policies, founding decisions away from institutions and into the hands of citizens with disabilities. In the concept of the personal budget, the diagnosis of the needs of a person with disabilities plays a major role. This means that the starting point in the constructive of support system is the needs to which service are matched. This is the opposite of the familiar forms of institutional care, where the forms of this care are imposed and definite in advance. This turn of direction in social policy towards persons with disabilities is crucial, and we need to remember of it every time. Social policy should also recognize the increased functioning costs that persons with disabilities face when they want to lead independent lives. The number of barriers and challenges they face in their daily functioning has a critical impact on the financing burden of their household budget. Households with persons with disabilities often have additional needs that require increased expenses, especially those related to health, including treatment and rehabilitation or long-term care. In 2024, a support benefit was introduced in Poland, targeted directly at people who have special needs in terms of independent functioning. The granting of the benefit is followed by deep diagnosis of the person's functioning and assessment of 32 activities of daily functioning is performed. There are a variety of activities of daily living grouped into physical, mental, intellectual, and sensory areas. Examples of these activities are changing body position, moving in familiar and unfamiliar environments, transport, communication, and social contact, cognitive functions, activities of daily living, home and time management. Each of these activities is assessed separately in terms of it and what kind of assistance a person with disability needs with it. This is reflected not only in the fact of the benefit itself and its amount, but also in the increasing knowledge of the needs of persons with disabilities. The knowledge gathered from such assessment can be used in the future to create social policies that are become better adapted to the needs of personal disabilities. I will conclude with something I often use in my speeches. What we are dealing with here is not just for persons with disabilities. It is a system for all of us, including those who do not have any disability right now. We in Poland are open to all activities that aim to empower persons with disabilities in modern societies, raising the issue of persons with disabilities internationally is an example of disability mainstreaming, which is an important way to promoting social inclusion and removing barriers that exclude persons with disabilities from equal enjoyment of their human rights. It is our responsibility to shape social policy in such a way as to ensure that persons with disability have their rightful place in social society on an equal footing with other citizens. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Krasoń, for your contribution. Now it is my honor to present to our next panelist, Mr. Boucar Diuouf, Director General of Social Action at the Ministry of Health and Social Action of Senegal. Mr. Diuouf holds a higher diploma in social work obtained in 2022 from the National School of Social Workers in Dakar, Senegal. Academically, he has a master's degree in health geography with a focus on primary health care supply and access, obtained from Sheikh Anta Diop University in Dakar, Senegal. He has proven expertise in the field of social protection due to his foundational training and professional experience in social work. Mr. Diuouf, welcome, and then you have the floor.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair, Mr. Guemes. Thank you, Zuleikha, Tambwe, Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, participants. I'm deeply honoured to represent Senegal at this roundtable to speak about community-based rehabilitation, empowerment strategies, and empowerment strategies for people with disabilities in Senegal. We'd like to talk about community-based rehabilitation, or CBR, bringing together methodologies, the components of the program, the outcomes of it, and mechanisms of financing, as well as challenges and future prospects. The context shows that community-based rehabilitation is one of the various sorts of rehabilitation, the origins of which go back to the Alma Ata Declaration, which was delivered in 1978 following the conference by the same name. CBR, as it's known, it was promoted as a strategy seeking to improve persons with disabilities' access to rehabilitation services in low and middle-income countries by optimizing the use of local resources. Over the last 30 years, through collaboration with other United Nations organizations, non-governmental organizations, and associations of persons with disabilities, community-based rehabilitation has developed as an inclusive multi-sectoral development strategy to respond at scale to the needs of persons with disabilities, ensuring their participation and inclusion in society and improving their quality of life. In Senegal, national public policies in the field of disability dovetail with the community rehabilitation program adopted in 2006 and approved by a legal plan via a decree of 2012. The program seeks to have long-term inclusive development through optimal access of persons with disabilities, local resources, and factors of production. In terms of financing, this takes into account methodology, operational components, key outcomes, and financing itself. Now, the methodology has been based around a community-based rehabilitation program, which is specifically carried out by the Ministry of Health and Social Affairs under the supervision of a sub-body. The financing mechanism prioritizes co-financing with diverse resources, access to disability based on local organization, using local organizations of persons with disabilities in a pyramid structure. The development of follow-up of financing, of a follow-up grid of state investments and partners in the field of disability. We have 14 essential components of the program, 26 sub-components at operational level, which I've just touched on. Now, when it comes to outcomes, between 2012 and 2024, the outcome framework showed that 455,733 individual economic projects and collective projects were financed by the state and partners to help persons with disabilities in the 14 regions of the country. A follow-up grid for financial investment was designed to facilitate financial evaluation. In terms of the mechanism of financing, from 2012 to 2024, the financial resources injected by the state and partners into the field of disability stood at 34.9 billion CFA francs. Measurements of and the innovative character of the financing was linked to the diversity of the sources of financing, the correlation between financing for persons with disabilities, and the Equal Opportunities Charter, which is a key mechanism for the inclusion of persons with disabilities. Indeed, this charter allows for there to be free access for persons with disability to social safety net programs such as universal health coverage, family payments, rehabilitation, transport, and health kits, particularly for urgent response to COVID-19 in 2020. Challenges. There is a challenge in terms of, for there to be optimal management of disability, the following must be taken into account. There needs to be effectiveness of the 7 services linked to the Equalities Charter and good access for persons with disabilities to social safety nets, resources and factors of production. We also need to have development of partnership to diversify and densify sources of financing for persons with disabilities. We need to get on top of disaggregated statistical data broken down by disability. We need to establish an information and management system for disability, taking into account investment, financial investment data on disability. Future prospects. For future prospects to manage disability, I'd like to touch on follow-up of the adoption of all texts implementing the guidance law on disability to give good access to persons with disabilities when it comes to resources and factors of production. There should also be the organisation of a special census on disability in collaboration with the national statistics and demographic agency to ensure that we have all data relative to disability. We also need to systematically capitalise on technical investments and financial investments to assist persons with disabilities in the context of the National Action Plan on Disability. We need to develop a new strategy for the management of disability over the 2025-2035 period by turning our attention to the public policies established by the head of state and the authorities, and we also need to have the development of a partnership at a technical level in the field of disability between Senegal and the member states of the UN, particularly focusing on the social and educational needs of persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Diuouf.
Thank you very much for your comments, sir.
Gentlemen, I now invite our next panelist to take the floor, Dr. Ola Abualghaib, Director of the United Nations Global Disability Fund, formerly the UNPRPD, a global multi-partner trust fund established to accelerate the implementation of the CRPD at the national level. Dr. Ola Abualghaib has led the GDF Secretariat since August 2019, developing its strategic operational framework 2020-2025 and 2025-2030, positioning the fund as a key global partner advancing disability inclusion and leading the rebrand of the fund. Under her direction, over $70 million has been invested in over 70 countries across 5 regions. An award-winning disability rights advocate with decades of experience, Ola has held leadership roles at several leading inclusive development and humanitarian organizations, including co-chairing the International Disability and Development Consortium and the Disability Rights Fund. Ola previously served as Director of the Global Influencing and Research at Leonard Cheshire Disability and has collaborated with the United Nations systems to promote disability inclusive policies and programs around the world. Dr. Abualghaib, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair, for the invitation for this very important discussion and timely one. Today's session has come at a very critical time. the issue of innovative financing and its relevance to disability inclusion and effective implementation of the Convention has never been more relevant. In the current global financial context, disability inclusion as we speak is at risk. We all know the financial landscape globally, and the concern we share in this room is how can we save the financing on disability inclusion. Even before the recent wave of cuts and reallocations, development spending on disability inclusion was already extremely low. Only around 3% of disability inclusion aid spending targets disability as the main objective. And the recent study found that only 0.3% of government domestic expenditure is typically spent on disability. Those figures paint a stark picture, both for international cooperation and domestic expenditure, against the backdrop of the only 5% of SDG targets being only on track for persons with disabilities. There is no doubt that without urgent and increased investment, we will collectively fail to meet our targets. I'm speaking to you today in my capacity as the director of the Global Disability Fund. The fund is the only interagency funding mechanism dedicated to implementing the convention at national level with collective efforts from the UN system, civil society, organizations of persons with disabilities, and government. We play a unique role in advancing the rights of persons with disabilities by bringing together all the diverse and relevant actors at national level. Since our creation in 2012, we have reached over 800 million people with disabilities in over 100 countries. A few weeks ago, the United Nations Secretary General, in his briefing on the UN80 reform, he confirmed the continued UN commitment to provide more direct funding and financial support to developing countries. This is our spirit on the fund and continued approach to transfer the majority of our funding to national level actors to engage collectively around disability inclusion. To our topic today on innovative financing, there is no doubt that the fund has supported many countries to try to transform the national ecosystem around disability inclusion. The strategic role of the fund is to work with governments and OBDs to test and pilot effective local solutions that can be replicated and scaled with national partners. For example, our program in Zimbabwe have developed a fully costed action plan for implementation of the national disability policy and is now working to increase resource allocations across ministries. Our program in Eswatini is also undertaking a costing of the National Disability Plan of Action to mobilize resources and ensure effective operationalization. In Montenegro, our program developed guidelines on disability inclusive budgeting and costed services that accelerate deinstitutionalization, autonomy, and independent living. Whilst our programs in Gambia, Mozambique, Serbia, Timor-Leste, and Zambia are all strengthening national budgeting systems and increasing resources allocated across sectors. I am also pleased today to share with you that we have just recently approved our new strategy for 2025-2030. Keeping in mind the global challenge we're facing right now in terms of the global ODA cuts, but also being reminded of the responsibility of the fund to continue its essential support to countries around disability inclusion. The focus of the strategy the coming 5 years will be around 4 thematic areas. One is on essential services, with emphasis on the intersection between health and education services. The other stream is on resilience around climate crisis and humanitarian response. The third one is the recently launched initiative at the Global Disability Summit in Berlin around resilience and inclusive cities. And the last one is about women and girls' protection and health, specifically on sexual reproductive health and maternal health. And our approach of looking into change around those areas is looking into it from holistic approach as systems change. And the 4 pathways the fund is taking are around supporting solutions in full partnerships with all actors, with emphasis on organizations of persons with disabilities, and through that influencing policy and financing options at national level, accompanied by learning. On our relevance of the topic today, the fund is taking an innovative approach in terms of financing those practices at national level. And I would like to share today the 4 areas of the financing methods that we will be taking moving forward. Considering the limiting of resources financially that we're all facing, our focus will be on financing impact-oriented approaches. We need together to ensure that whatever the fund is supporting is impacting people on the ground that needs it most. We will also look into a catalytic and seed funding modalities that will be looking into co-financing domestic resources, but also development and humanitarian investments. The 4th funding approach we are taking is a fund with an appetite of risk to ensure equity and equality of opportunity for organizations of persons with disabilities to engage around the policy and systems processes we're going to promote. But also, it will provide potentials for innovation around needed solutions when it comes to equity on disability inclusion. The last approach we're taking is efficiency in funding and engaging with the right actors that are really essential around what the countries are choosing as priorities for change for them. At international level, the fund will also be engaging globally to share the learnings from the programs that we will be supporting through the recently launched hub globally that we have just announced this week, through the Catalytic and Inclusion Hub that will be implemented in partnership with the International Disability Alliance along other partners. The hub will be sharing a lot of learning from the ground, but also trying to influence the global agenda on investing and financing disability efforts. We recognize again as a fund that this is a very difficult moment we're all facing, but we continue to be committed to support countries and making sure that disability inclusion at country level is not missed in both development and humanitarian context. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abualghaib, for your excellent presentation. Dear colleagues, civil society friends, I will now hand over the co-chairmanship back to Mrs. Tambwe, Vice President of the conference, who will continue to moderate our meeting today. Over to you, Mrs. Tambwe.
I thank Mr. Gomez for his chairing of this roundtable. I now invite our 5th and final panelist, Mr. Matrika Devkota, representative of KOSHISH, a national mental health self-help organization based in Nepal, to deliver his presentation. As a person with psychosocial disability from a remote area of Nepal, Mr. Devkota has experienced first-hand mental distress, psychosocial barrier, and marginalization since adolescence. Mr. Devkota firmly believes that persons with disability should receive economic empowerment for the restoration of self-esteem as well as for human dignity. Mr. Devkota has devoted himself to transform community for inclusive and well, as well as speaking up for equality. For his work, he has received recognition as an Ashkoka Fellowship and an awarded the Dr. Guslam International Award for breaking the chain of stigma and many other alokas. Mr. Devkota, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegate, colleagues and friends. My name is Matrika Devkota. I'm a person with psychosocial disability and executive director and founder of Organization of People with Disability, KOSHISH, which founded in 2008 in Nepal. I was born in one of the remote part of the Nepal, began experience psychosocial distress during my adolescence. While my mental distress itself was difficult, the stigma, discrimination, social exclusion I faced were even more painful. During that time, I faced highest level of discrimination and social exclusion in my life. And I realized that the person with mental distress always struggle for the basic aspect of human existence, identity, dignity, and respect. My journey started after post-CRPD era, as my learning from the CRPD was a turning point for me to enhance diversity and advocate the disability right and issues of psychosocial disability in Nepal. Although Nepal had adopted Disabled Welfare Act 1982, the act primarily conceptualized psychosocial disability through medical model with limited alignment to the human right-based framework. Despite of the inclusion, there was no one to claim this category. To bridge that gap, I joined with the Cross Disabilities, National Federation of Disabled Nepal, an umbrella organization of people with disabilities in 2014. I worked there as an integrated psychosocial disability within disability momentum and actively contributed adopting the act related with a person with disabilities 2017, which formally recognized psychosocial disability as one of the 10 major disability categories for the first time in Nepal. KOSHISH has good example of said how the meaningful inclusion of person with disabilities in decision-making process. Nepal has taken affirmative action to promote the right of person with disabilities. The Constitution guarantees dignity, equality, employment, social justice. The Act related to person with disability 2017 developed with active participation of person with disability address the additional right of person, children, women with and psychosocial disability envision the disability directive coordination committee in local, provincial, federal government to promote disability right and social security system. KOSHISH has initiated from a coalition with cross disability with underrepresented disability groups, psychosocial, autism, deafblind, intellectual disability group who are often marginalized from the disability momentum and government planning and the budget to promote their right, engage in advocacy in local, provincial, and federal level for the inclusion and representation. At the community level, KOSHISH support to empower individuals with psychosocial disability and facilitate from peer support groups. And some of them have registered their own organization of people with disability at local level. COSHISH also facilitates to enhance access to income generating opportunities and social security system. This initiative has contributed to the disability inclusion in the plan of the government. At the national level, COSHISH continued to lobby and advocacy with the relevant authorities to amend, repeal discriminatory law against persons with psychosocial disability. In Nepal, over 69 Act and 11 regulation constant discriminatory provision. COSHISH also has filed these cases in Supreme Court of Nepal for the amendment and discrimination legal provision. Despite these progresses, significant challenges persist regarding disability inclusion in Nepal. In Nepal, persons with mental distress are by law unqualified in every part of social, cultural, and political life and labeled by the law as unsound mind. I just use this as a reference, and my apology for using this word. I am considered legally unqualified. Disability continue to be viewed primarily through a charity medical approach with limited adoption of the social and human rights-based model. The existing legal framework failed to address the right of persons with disabilities, especially discrimination on persons with psychosocial disability in legal framework persist. For instance, individuals with psychosocial disability are legally barred from the entering, contact, purpose of the candidacy, vote in election. Even the act-related person with disability remain silent about the Article 12 of the Convention. It further doesn't elaborate the definition and assessment tools specific to psychosocial disability. Consequently, persons with psychosocial disability are facing social security and government services. The prevailing deep-rooted stigma and discrimination against those groups have limited their access to services, participation, education, and employment. Many of them are excluded or marginalized from family and community life. Institutionalization is increasing, often justified by providing food and shelter for the people with psychosocial disability, limiting their social, economic, cultural right to benefit from the social development. Persons with psychosocial disability continue to face significant resource constraint, limiting effective advocacy with duty bearer. At the OPD, we encounter significant barrier in assessing donor funding, particularly due to substantial reduction of support in the major donor. Disability inclusion remains a lower priority for many funding agencies. Persons with disability are at high risk of living in poverty due to the additional cost associated with their disability-related need and limited economic opportunity. They also encounter persistent barrier to employment, education, and social protection. Children with psychosocial disability face limited access to education, which hinders their future career prospect and economic opportunities, further deepening social and economic inequalities. These issues are often overlooked with innovative financing mechanisms, which tend to focus more on those sectors. Ensuring sustainable, consistent, and long-term funding for OPD through the innovative financing is essential for promoting sustainable development in alignment with the Leave No One Behind principle. The International Conference on the Financing for the Development and the World Summit for Social Development often critical opportunity to address the inequalities, economic growth, and social development for all. We firmly believe that disability issues must be carried through the discussion and demand that disability rights are high priority in those forums. We are the inclusion of social inclusion measures, strategic partnership with OPDs, and enhance financial access for persons with disabilities. The outcome of those summits must be firmly directed toward ensuring full inclusion, equality, and justice for persons with disabilities. The generation should adopt human rights-based approach in line with CRPD. Innovative financing mechanism should focus on inclusion, employment, and social protection in policies. To ensure the inclusion, participation of persons with disability must be assured throughout the process. Furthermore, by embedding disability perspective in financing and policy, fostering international cooperation, the conference can advance the SDGs and ensure leave no one behind in disability inclusive development effort. COSHISH strongly requests to view the issues of disability as high priority, ensure their participation and issues of second Old Summit, advancing public awareness and their right and contribution require maintaining a disability perspective across all policies. Key action to promote the right of person with disability require mainstreaming disability in policy development through meaningful consultation with persons with disabilities, strengthening innovative financing mechanism, disability inclusive budget, building long-term strategies for partnership, and ensuring accessible decision-making space are essential to foster inclusion, leadership, public awareness, and promotion of disability rights. Additionally, improving disability disaggregated data, capacity building, and enhancing advocacy efforts are crucial to reshaping societal attitude and fostering a culture of inclusion and respect. We firmly believe that adopting those approaches will contribute to enhancing access to economic opportunities, financial resources, and social inclusion, supporting persons with disabilities in leading, empowering persons with disabilities to lead dignified, active life within the society. I thank you for this opportunity.
Many thanks, Mr. Devkota, for your insights. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we are now at the close of the presentations. Thank you very much to all the panelists for your excellent presentations and interesting contributions to this roundtable, which has provided a sound and rich base of our continued discussions. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let me now move to the next segment of this roundtable. That is the interactive discussion between panelists, delegations, and participants. As announced at the outset of this meeting, in this segment of approximately 30 minutes, there will be an opportunity for delegation and other observers to request the floor, to either pose specific questions to the panelists or to make a brief comment relevant to the discussion. For this purpose, delegates and other participants may press the button at their desk to request the floor. All interested delegations and accredited observers for the UN entity and human rights institutions are also able to inscribe. In a moment, on a first-come, first-served basis, we will call and give the floor to the first three inscribed government delegations whose microphone shall be unmuted when they are given the floor. In order to ensure the discussion is inclusive and following the discussions of the Bureau, we will invite one NGO, one UN entity, and one national human rights institution to take the floor. When you are given the floor, please first identify yourself and the title of the delegation or organization you are representing. Please either pose a specific question to the panel or share your brief comments relevant to the discussion. Please refrain from reading prepared statements. All interventions must be no longer than 2 minutes, with no exception. I will count on everybody's cooperation to adhere to this time limit. The floor is now open for inscription. Ladies and gentlemen, I recognize the representative of Ecuador. Please, you have the floor.
Hola. Es un honor.
Thank you. It's an honor to address you on behalf of the Ecuadorian State and the National Council for Equality for Disabilities, or CONATIS. Ecuador, in accordance with Article 28 of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, has worked tirelessly to guarantee access for persons with disabilities and their families to a decent life with access to food, housing, drinking water, public services and social protection programs. Our approach is based on a framework of human rights, sustainability and social justice. Through the Ministry of Economic and Social Inclusion, more than 52,000 persons with disabilities received a comprehensive care throughout their lifespan with services designed to promote their autonomy, independent lives and social participation. CONATIS brings together efforts at all levels of government, ensuring follow-up and evaluation of our policies. One of the focuses of our management is work and employment, which seeks to empower persons with disabilities through access to work financing and productive inclusion. In this context, we have strengthened our approach towards improving social development policies with innovative financing mechanisms to effectively meet the needs of this population. More than 10,700 persons with disabilities have enjoyed training in financial education, which is accessible training, developed in alliance with BAN Ecuador, with content designed using universal access criteria. In addition, around 34,000 persons with disabilities have accessed preferential credit lines to bolster activities in sectors such as agriculture, trade and services. In addition, with the support of the Ministry of Production, we provide technical support to entrepreneurs with disabilities, and we've created a national register to this effect with more than 450 productive initiatives. Our goal is clear: to ensure that nobody with disability is left behind. We support a model of development which the speaker's microphone is cut off.
I thank the distinguished representative of Ecuador, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United Republic of Tanzania. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Facilitator. I would start with the emphasis on the international support that is advanced to the developed countries, that all the international support that is given through even the UN agencies, European Union and other entities needed to take into account that when they are given to a specific country, it's better to take into recognizance the statistics of person with disability and the specific needs of person with disability for them to benefit from that kind of aid. But also, I would emphasize on domestic schemes to ensure empowerment of persons with disabilities, that we needed to come up with domestic schemes. For instance, for Tanzania, we have the National Financial Inclusive Framework, and it put emphasis on issues of disability, and the National Literacy Toolkit training guide that has been developed to ensure that also person with disability benefits from that kind of financial literacy, and it is in accessible formats. But it is through that framework that Tanzania is not the increasing support, financial support for person with disability. For instance, we have by law that 2% of the district council own source is just allocated for person with disability, and it is given as interest-free loans. And we have simplified the way of accessing those loans for persons with disabilities. But also we have other interventions that are aiming at empowering persons with disabilities, like the provision of direct financing support to individuals with disabilities, but also we've designated 30% of the national procurement opportunities for persons with disability and the other special groups like women, elderly. All these are.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United Republic of Tanzania, and I now recognize and kindly invite the distinguished representative of Egypt.
Thank you. It is my honor to address you as a President of the Council of Persons with Disabilities today in this important session to present Egypt's experience in empowering persons with disabilities through innovative financing and investment in social development. Egypt has paid great attention to empowering persons with disabilities by establishing comprehensive institutional and legislative framework through establishing the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, enacting the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Law, and the fund differently abled by allocating 15 billion Egyptian pounds for the benefits. To ensure improved living standard and achieve social balance to them, approximately 1.3 million individuals benefit from the conditional cash support program, Karama Dignity, with a comprehensive package of measures to ensure development, totaling approximately 11 billion Egyptian pounds annually. Meanwhile, during the past year, 13,586 citizens benefit from the subsidized real estate financing services worth over 1 billion Egyptian pounds, in addition to allocating 5% of residential units in housing projects. To transform from protection to empowerment, the state provided 37,500 job opportunities to persons with disabilities, empowered 1,350 beneficiaries under the Economic Empowerment Program Forza Opportunity, and trained and employed 2,500 people under the Egypt is More Beautiful with You initiative. Believing
I thank the distinguished representative of Egypt, and I now would like to invite the first NGO which has requested the floor, Global Disability Innovation Hub. You have the floor, please.
Good afternoon, distinguished dignitaries and colleagues. My name is Pollyanna Wardrop from the Global Disability Innovation Hub. We were established in 2016 as a legacy organisation of the 2012 Paralympic Games, and one of our key areas of focus is inclusive finance. And in today's landscape, and as the international community prepares for the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, and as national financial inclusion strategies propagate and interventions start and scale, innovative transformation that centres on the persons with disabilities and realises and accelerates their human rights must emerge. As we engage with finance and funding stakeholders, we must overcome the well-known constraints in our work: lack of awareness, perception that disability inclusion is a separate niche focus area, an assumption that is costly and it should be addressed by other stakeholders, and finally that there is a significant lack of data. At GDI Hub, we've been researching and developing strategies to apply a disability-inclusive lens to investment frameworks with global institutions such as the International Finance Corporation. We work with the banking sector directly through an Asian Development Bank project, conducting research, delivering tools for the sector, and to engage change and provide bespoke consultancy for companies wherever they are today. We also design innovative programmatic approaches in climate financing and explore opportunities to bridge financial inclusion and innovation into other sectors. For example, by conceptualizing a hybrid investment mechanism such as an AT growth fund, we are looking at how new financial models can be catalytic and transformative, an area to continue to build expertise and leadership in as we explore collaborative opportunities to accelerate impact. The approach to innovative and inclusive finance must be led by persons with disabilities. It must be delivered through an inclusive design approach and hold both the private and public.
I thank the distinguished representative of Global Disability Innovation Hub, and I now recognize the distinguished representative of South Africa. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Guided by Article 19 and 27 of UNPRPD, South Africa is implementing innovative financing for social development services to persons with disabilities towards the inclusion and right to work on equal basis. We are financing social development programs ranging from social protection policies to care and support services such as residential facilities, caregiving and personal assisted devices, respite care, and in-home care. Annually, the state provides financial support for persons with disability through different types of grants, such as care dependency grant for children with disability and disability grants for adults with disabilities. This is enacted on social assistance for vulnerable groups. We actively pursue social protection and human and community development program and ensure that persons with disability have reasonable quality of life. We have also expanded innovative financing beyond grants to include subsidy schemes and loans. Additionally, expanding public works program facilitates funding for projects to provide persons with disability with temporary employment based off renewal processes. The non-profit organizations of persons with disability are funded through legally processed, and they also have tax rebate that applies to persons with disability, particularly for assistive devices and personal assistance. We are also currently providing programs to facilitate in-home and community support services and personal assistance for inclusion in the community. Furthermore, South Africa has programs to fund cooperative and self-help groups through self-employment for persons with disability. The sheltered employment factories and protective employment is funded through subsidy schemes. Subsidy schemes are also offered to persons with disability with own small, micro, and medium enterprises through the provision of equipment and access to capital. The objective of all of these innovative
I thank the distinguished representative of South Africa, and now I recognize the distinguished representative of Italy. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, President. I am Roberto Speciale, the President of ANFAS Nazionale. Here, I like to reiterate that the empowerment of persons with disability is a crucial point on which to reflect and act as if we truly want to achieve inclusive, just, and sustainable societies at the global level. Italy, thanks to the work of Minister Locatelli, is currently experiencing an important period of reform that places our country among the most advanced in the world. However, even today, not all people with disabilities, especially those with more complex needs, have access to adequate tools and support to achieve empowerment and to participate actively in their communities. But we know, with the right processes of empowerment and adequate investments, the quality of life of people with disabilities and their families can be significantly improved. In Italy, the path is well outlined, but we must human rights and human civil and social rights are a responsibility of all. They are not negotiable and should not be seen as kind concessions. People with disabilities must be recognized as a valuable resource, as a part of the world, not apart from it. So, supporting people with disabilities in developing their human potential represents the greatest investment for an inclusive society that leaves no one alone or behind. This conference, I hope, will represent a driving force toward achieving this important goal. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Italy, and now I recognize the distinguished representative of Guyana. You have the floor, please.
Delegation of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, we thank the distinguished panel for their insight. Indeed, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities created the necessary momentum for a significant shift in the approach to disability through its express provision on the right to non-discrimination, full participation in society, and equal access to opportunities for persons with disabilities. Guyana continues to honor its commitment under the Convention by prioritizing the inclusion of disability rights in development policies, a crucial step towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Specifically, through Guyana's low-carbon development strategy, revenues earned from forest climate services and the natural resources sector are used to embed disability inclusion in all aspects of national life. For instance, through accessible schools, inclusive vocational training, and healthcare adapted to the needs of persons with disabilities. A recent partnership with the Inter-American Development Bank will support Guyana's ongoing efforts to modernize and expand its social protection systems. This includes increasing coverage of the Public Assistance Program, which has already supported thousands of persons with disabilities through direct cash transfer and expansion of specialized training programs. We're also proud of the fact that Guyana offers interest-free loans through the Small Business Bureau to businesses led by persons with disabilities. Chair, although we have made significant gains over the years, there is still much work to be done to ensure the full and equal participation of persons with disabilities. The upcoming Second World Summit for Social Development presents an opportune moment to address the gaps in the implementation and recommit to the principles of the Copenhagen Declaration and Program of Action, while giving momentum to the 2030 Agenda, ensuring that no one is left behind. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Guyana. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize since we are running behind time. Distinguished delegates, many thanks for your interesting comments and questions posed to the panel. I will now turn to the distinguished panelists to provide their response and share their thoughts on the question raised and comments made. We would kindly ask each panelist to limit their presentation or response for 1 minute. Let's begin with Ms. Jane Spring. Ms. Jane Spring, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for those comments. So interesting to hear from Ecuador, Tanzania, Egypt, from Polly and the Global Innovation Hub, South Africa, Italy, and Guyana. We truly have a lot in common, but it is incredibly important that we continue to learn from each other, that we look across the globe to see programs that have been innovative, have been successful, have been evaluated, so that we work together to build on those examples. I'm also looking forward to the continued discussion out of this room between people about how we capitalise on the information that has been shared. Thank you very much for including me on this panel.
Thank you, Ms. Jane. I now give the floor to Mr. Boucar Diuouf. You have the floor.
Voilà, merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Chair. In terms of the questions that were put to me, in particular, I'm going to come back to this issue of the equal opportunities map. This is the main mechanism we have for social inclusion in Senegal in the area of disabilities, and it covers this service. This mechanism is multi-sectoral in nature, in that it addresses healthcare with the Ministry of Health and Social Action, but also empowerment with the Ministry of the Family involved, as well as solidarity and other ministries as well, such as the Ministry of Transport, the Ministry of the Finances and the Budget. These are ministries that are joining forces to make sure that people with disabilities can have access to this mechanism and make the most of the opportunities that it offers. This map goes hand in hand with an extremely inclusive inclusion policy. And the current government of the Senegalese state, on the 27th of November 2024, a statement was made in the Council of Ministers that set the tone for the directions that we're working in, so that we could also get a precise figure of the number of persons with disabilities that we're talking about. As I said in my statement, we've begun a specific census exercise for persons with disabilities so that we can get a precise number of the people with disabilities that we're talking about, so that we are then able to properly apply the directives of the President and the government as they relate to persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Mr. Diuouf, I now invite Dr. Ola Abualghaib to speak. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I am going to actually focus my comments on the inputs came from colleagues from Ecuador, Tanzania, Egypt, and South Africa. We're very pleased to hear the progress in 4 countries. The fund has been investing and supporting efforts on disability inclusion in all of them, and we're looking forward to continuously support those countries as they advance the rights of persons with disabilities in the coming period. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abualghaib, for your response. I now give the floor to Mr. Devkota for response. You have the floor.
Thank you for very comprehensive input. I would like to highlight that while talking about disability also, we need to talk about intersectionality and diversity. Not just talking disability itself is enough, but there are also many diversities in the disability. And also, especially, I like to highlight about underrepresented disability group, for example, psychosocial disability. So traditionally, and looking at the lens of medical person, but it's with a barrier. And also, I like to be reminded still, and many parts of the world, like in my country, like the legal capacity and has been taken away, and despite of the convention, and also the issues of deinstitutionalization, and those issues are big issue that I would like to request and appeal that. And so intersectionality and marginalization and affirmative action in disabilities are very much key required. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Devkota, for your response. Ladies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Mr. Gomez, my fellow co-chair, I would like to thank all distinguished panelists of this roundtable and all delegations for participants from civil society and the United Nations system for your valuable contributions to enrich this discussion. I wish to acknowledge with sincere thanks the support and services provided by the Secretariat, notably UNDESA, and all of the interpreters, CART, services provider, and sign language interpreters, among many others who have worked tirelessly to deliver this successful meeting. Thank you all for your work and contributions. I would also like to remind all speakers to consider sending their statements to e-statements@un.org for posting to the UN Journal, not later than 2 hours of their delivery, if you wish to do so. With this Roundtable 1 is now formally concluded, and I declare the meeting closed. I wish to thank you all, and good afternoon.